Welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're stepping back in time to examine one of the most profound, emotionally charged, and frankly, enduring historical accounts in human history, the narrative of Karbala. We're going to objectively analyze the source material to understand exactly what happened, and more importantly, why this specific event continues to resonate so powerfully across the world today. So let's just dive right in with the core question, the big mystery at the center of this entire historical narrative. How does a tragic defeat 1400 years ago become an eternal victory for a faith? On paper, Karbala looks like a devastating military loss, right? A small family completely annihilated by a massive empire. And yet, the source text tells us that this unimaginable sacrifice is actually what secured the survival of an entire religion. Let's break down exactly how that happened. To truly understand the end of this story, we've got to start at the very beginning. Section 1. Birth and early years. Historical texts tell us Imam Hussain was born on the 3rd of Shaban in the 4th year of Hijri in the city of Medina. But here's what's deeply surprising about the sources. There is a massive spiritual significance tied to him literally from day one. The narrative states that the angel Jibril or Gabriel brought the name Hussein directly from Allah. And the Prophet Muhammad's love for his grandson was just profound. He would reportedly pause his own sermons, actually step down from the pulpit just to pick up a young Hussein. But he also gave a warning. He prophesied to his companions that this child would one day be innocently killed for the religion, and he urged them to help him when that time came. Fast forward through the years, and tragedy strikes the family over and over, which brings us to Section 2, Yazid and the Stand. By the year 60 Hijri, things completely boil over. On one side, you have Yazid. Now, the sources describe him as the ruler of 3 continents. We are talking about the most powerful king in the world at the time. Yet he publicly rejects Islam and disrespects the Quran. On the exact opposite end of the spectrum, you've got Imam Hussain. Hussein is solitary, living quietly in Medina, but he holds immense moral authority as the Prophet's grandson. He absolutely refuses to pledge allegiance to Yazid, knowing full well that endorsing a ruler like that would essentially mean the end of his grandfather's religion. This right here is the crucial turning point. Hussein's stance is totally unwavering. The texts record him declaring that Yazid is a liar and stating that if he has to be sacrificed just to expose this truth, he will not step back. But, that unyielding principle comes with a huge cost. To avoid unnecessary bloodshed in his grandfather's holy city, Hussein is actually forced to migrate. Yazid's grip is tightening everywhere, bringing us to Section 3, the journey to Karbala. Let's quickly map out this journey because it's a lot of movement. First, Hussein seeks asylum in Mecca. While he's there, he receives thousands of desperate letters from the people of Kufa, pleading with him to come save them and the religion from Yazid's tyranny. So, responding to those calls, Hussein actually converts his Hajj pilgrimage into an Umrah, again avoiding violence in Mecca, and heads toward Kufa. He sends his cousin, Muslim bin Aqil, ahead as an ambassador, but through bribery and fear, the political tides in Kufa flip. Muslim bin Aqil is martyred, and those thousands of Kufans just fall silent. As Hussein's caravan approaches, they are intercepted in the desert by a commander named Hur, leading 1,000 soldiers. But wait, here is an astonishing detail from the source material. Seeing Hur's army dying of thirst in the desert, Hussein literally shares his own limited water supply with his enemies and their horses. But that kindness is not returned. The caravan is forced to halt, which leads to Section 4, the Siege of Water. On the 2nd of Muharram, the caravan arrives at this barren land known as Karbala. Yazid's army intentionally forces Hussein to pitch his tents far away from the banks of the Euphrates River, also known as the Farrat. Why? Well, because by the 7th of Muharram, they enact an absolutely brutal strategy. They completely cut off the water supply to Hussein's camp. Just think about that. This means denying water not just to grown men, but to women and innocent children under a scorching desert sun. As tensions hit a breaking point, the army plans to attack on the 9th, but Hussein requests just one final night simply to worship Allah. The texts reveal a disparity in scale here that is frankly terrifying. You've got Hussein's tiny camp, literally a single family and a handful of loyal friends. Against them, the governor Ibn Ziyad sends wave after wave of soldiers. First, an army of 18,000 under Omar bin Saad. But the historical accounts tell us those ranks eventually swell to a staggering 80,000 men. It's the military might of an entire empire, fully mobilized against a thirsty, isolated family. So on the night of the 9th of Muharram, looking at those impossible odds, Hussein does something extraordinary. He gathers his companions, extinguishes the lamp in the tent, and tells them they are completely free from their oath of allegiance to him. He urges them to use the cover of darkness to escape, pointing out that the army only wants his life. But when that lamp is relit, not a single person has moved. They all pledge to stay and face whatever is coming alongside him.
And that incredible loyalty brings us to Section 5, the day of Ashura, the 10th of Muharram.
The sources detail a sequence of martyrdoms that is just heartbreaking. It actually begins with her, the very commander who intercepted Husayn, repenting, crossing enemy lines, and dying for Husayn. He's followed by fiercely loyal companions like John and Habib. Then it's Husayn's own family, the Bani Hashim. His young nephew Qasim, his brother Abbas, who tragically loses his arms at the riverbank trying to fetch water for the children, his son, Ali Akbar, and perhaps most devastatingly of all, Husayn's 6-month-old infant son, Ali Asghar. The texts report he is shot right through the neck with a 3-pronged arrow, while Husayn is simply holding him up, asking the enemy to give the baby water.
Finally, Husayn is left completely alone. The sources describe this visually striking final confrontation. Husayn rides out on the Prophet's own horse, Murjis. He's wearing the Prophet's clothes. He's holding his father Ali's sword. He explicitly reminds this massive army of his lineage. And they recognize the relics. They know exactly who he is. But the texts explain that Yazid's army, driven by greed for gold and a deep-seated hatred for Husayn's father, Ali, they attack him anyway.
21,000. That is the staggering number of arrows a commander named Shimr ordered to be fired simultaneously at Imam Hussain. All while the tents holding the surviving women and children were being set on fire. Completely surrounded, Husayn is forced to fight back just to defend his family. The climax of this battle is chillingly reported in the sources. Gravely wounded, an unseen voice tells Husayn his sacrifice is accepted. So Husayn stops fighting. He falls from his horse and enters sujud, prostrating right there on the burning sand, praising Allah. The soldiers actually hesitate to kill him because they see the face of the Prophet in his eyes. Seeing them freeze up, Shimr purposefully strikes his own dagger against a stone to blunt it, maximizing the cruelty before striking Husayn from behind while he's in a state of prayer.
The battle ends there, but the narrative certainly does not. Section 6, Aftermath and Enduring Legacy.
The physical indignity inflicted upon Husayn after his death is tough to even comprehend. The texts report that special horses were brought in from Yemen, specifically to trample his lifeless body. And what's deeply tragic is the isolation here. Soldiers from various rival tribes in the army actually stepped in to protect the bodies of the other fallen companions, saving their own kin from being trampled. But for the Prophet's grandson, there was no tribe left to protect him. His body bore the brunt of that assault entirely alone. Yet, despite all of this, the narrative tells us the mission absolutely did not fail. Husayn's final request was to keep the message alive. On the 11th of Muharram, the surviving women and children were taken captive, marched in chains towards Kufa and then to Sham. But Husayn's sister, Bibi Zainab, took up the mantle. Through incredibly defiant sermons delivered right inside the courts of her captors, she ensured that the true story of Karbala was broadcast to the world. She flat out refused to let the narrative be buried in that desert.
And that brings us to the core takeaway from the source material. The outcome, 1,400 years later, is profound. The text asserts that after this event, no one ever ruled with the name of Yazid again. Meanwhile, the Quran remains, the faith of Islam remains, and the love for the Prophet and his family endures fiercely in the hearts of millions. By willingly sacrificing literally everything he had, Husayn achieved his ultimate stated goal of preserving his faith forever. Let's leave things here today with a final thought to reflect on. If a legacy can survive 1,400 years against such unimaginable, impossible odds, we really have to ask ourselves, does true victory actually belong to the might of the sword, or does it belong to the power of the sacrifice? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today, and I really hope this provided a clear, structured insight into the incredible historical narrative of Karbala.